you know, typical military stuff, especially over the last 20 years. I've been shot at, got my face blown up. I've almost killed my friends in a rollover Humvee accident while I was driving. Like all this, just normal stuff that kind of goes along with the territory. And never have I ever been even close to the level of fear that I had when I was what you were talking about earlier, looking at myself essentially naked with who I actually am, not who I was trying to be, not who I was supposed to be, or whatever, but just completely bare to the bones who I really that that was scary.
Okay, welcome back. Mental Purpose Podcast starts right now. Have you ever wanted to pick a Navy SEAL's brain? Well, we're going to get into a Navy SEAL's brain today. Here's the thing though. We're not going to talk about what you think we're going to talk about, like war and fighting and defending and that kind of thing. We are going to talk about actually what I was very surprised by. We're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff. A lot of cool stuff. We're going to talk about being unfulfilled. We're going to be talking about your life grows to the extent that you do. Laden with failure, being hardwired to go versus slowing down, and how to deal with that and how to actually get into that slow down phase where most growth comes from. How not to let the external environment affect your internal self. We're going to talk about the power of psychedelics and plant medicine. We're going to talk about dealing with your identity, your current identity, and finding the real you. Talking about connected to your deepest self, different levels of fear, epigenetics, failure as a SEAL, processing shame, accessing flow state, and much more. I want to keep these intros really fast. My guest today is Diego Ugalde, former Navy SEAL, owns a really great business called the Trident Approach. It is I love this episode. It was so much fun. You all are going to have fun. Now, here's the thing. Within the first 20 minutes, this guy's going to drop so much info for you. You got to make sure that you're writing. You got to make sure that you have a pen and paper ready or taking notes on your phone, whatever you're going to do. This is gold. I'm telling you, it's freaking gold. Now, look, here's the business side. Make sure you join our community, the Mental Purpose community or the Quitters Club community on Facebook. There's tons of free resources. We've got discovery courses. We've got design courses to how to design your life and be intentional. We've got break. Oh, you just name it. Like we've got masterminds. We've got so many cool things going on. You want to be a part of it. I think that intro is long enough. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for listening. As always, enjoy this episode and make sure you rate and review if you haven't. Subscribe to the podcast. Give us a rating of 5-star if you love it. Give us some feedback. mentalpurpose@gmail.com. Or sorry, menonpurposepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to give feedback, I love it. It helps us course correct. Enjoy. Okay, Diego, let's finish. Let's keep this conversation going before we hit the record button. We were talking about some cool stuff. So I said the one thing I never really got about growing and scaling a business is being patient and slowing down. Right? That has been a monumental increase in my business. In addition to working on me, because we are the operators of our businesses, our lives, our relationships. And I preach this all the time. Your business, your life, your relationships grow to the extent that you do. And that's something we're actually going to get into here. I know you know that really clearly.
Well, it's just funny, just the synchronicity of everything, because I literally wrote a post on my LinkedIn account today about exactly that. I was coaching someone this morning, and they were just talking about, man, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and I don't know, but I just feel like I'm a mess. And I'm like, well, you're not taking any time for yourself and really slowing down. And it was the thing is that we're taught in our culture to just achieve and just consume going. And no matter what, as long as you don't give up, you keep going, you're going to get to where you want to go. And one of the more difficult things, so I love hearing you saying what you're saying, because it took me 30 years to finally get to a place where I'm like, I can't achieve anymore. Like I've done everything that I wanted to do in the SEAL teams and in combat and all this stuff. And how is it that I'm still so unfulfilled? And
Yeah.
by doing exactly what you're talking about, slowing down and actually doing without doing is really how I started to grow and really connecting with my deepest self, which is something that you can't do when you're on the go. You can't do when you've got all these like check boxes and things like that. You
Yeah.
have to knock off the list. So It's a
You
really
know,
important lesson.
what's really interesting is a lot of guys who are not in your professional achievement position, right? It's not good or
Hmm.
bad, better or worse. It's you've achieved some pretty high marks, right?
Yeah.
And things that you know the like vast majority of the world could never accomplish. They could never get their brain to that level of commitment or discipline or action or activity or pushing through fear. So I'm curious to know, when we talk to, let's say, regular guys, like civilian guys who are just in business and they're going, 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 yet we train them to kind of turn that off, slow down, focus on them, be selfish for a second. How does a guy like you that's been battle trained, Navy SEAL trained, business trained, like for decades, how the hell do you slow down and focus up when you're basically hardwired to go?
Yeah. Everyone who has known me since probably the age of 5 has always thought or said to me, "You're like the happiest dude I've ever met." I would always be laughing or singing. I used to be a lead singer in a rock and roll band or whatever, and I'd just be jamming out in the car. And one example I like to use is I was stationed in Germany for 3.5 years, and it was just, and Germany's cool, but the coolest thing about Germany is everything is just a couple hours away.
Yeah,
So me living in San Diego and driving up is to LA is the equivalent of me just driving into Switzerland or France or Belgium, whatever. It's just right there. Everything is right
sure.
there. And because of that, we got to go to like these amazing countries. I've been to like 58 different countries.
Wow.
And I can tell you with every ounce of honesty that I have in my soul, it seemed like every weekend I would be compelled to say out loud, this is the best day of my life, because I
Nice.
would be in the middle of some pristine blue lake in the middle of the Alps, or on the beaches of France or whatever it is. Like, this is the coolest thing ever, and I
Yeah,
really meant it. And then in 2015, I moved to San Diego, back to San Diego to finish out my last tour in the military. I'm sitting there driving down the freeway. The windows are all rolled down. Music's blasting. I'm singing away, happy as could be. And somebody would cut me off, and bam, just instantly
triggered.
angry. Like, I wanted to, whatever, this guy's a jerk, whatever. And then finally, after all those years, I asked myself for the first time, how happy could I really be if all it takes is somebody to cut me off on the freeway
Totally.
to completely I mean, I'm telling you, you might as well have had like pinatas going on, mariachi bands and stuff playing. That's how happy I was. Somebody cuts me off, and all of a sudden it's like wartime. And just asking that simple question of how happy could I really be if that's all it takes to get me off kilter is what led me down this path of, okay, well, I've achieved. It's not like I haven't failed. In fact, much of my career, and especially in the early times, was laden with failure.
Sure.
So even then, like, after having overcome all this stuff and finally being successful, getting everything I ever worked for or wanted to get, it wasn't enough. And then, yeah, so going in that path, which eventually ended up just making a big giant U-turn into the deepest part of myself, was where I was headed. That's where I really, really learned, oh, okay, so there's more to this life than I ever knew or was ever taught or ever
Yeah.
explained to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is our one of our the like main message of our business is we help people stop or quit living the life that they thought would make them happy
Mm,
and start or calibrate or figure out how to live the life that actually will, like, give themselves permission.
yeah.
And what's interesting about what you're saying is I think the average person would go, "Oh, well, he's a military guy. He's trained as a fighter, as a SEAL, like elite. So of course he's gonna instantly snap over to I'm gonna kill somebody, right, for cutting me off." Yet there is no difference between you and your training and the average guy driving to his cubicle 9 to 5. And that
Yeah.
external stimulation trigger can affect the whole internal world. Like that is equal across the whole
Yeah.
plane. Women too. Women too. What's your
Yeah.
take on the I'm interested in what you learned about how the external environment affects your internal environment, and how you curbed that, or how you switched that or shifted that.
Wow. Okay. So what you were talking about also comes up a lot when I'm talking with people and in their lives. They're like, "Well, I've never done anything like what you did, but here's what I did." And most of the time they talk about it as my existence within the realm of danger and things. And so I would always ask, have you ever almost been in a car accident where you ever almost thought you were about to die in just 1 second? And almost all the time it's like, "Well, yes." I'm like, "Well, you haven't experienced anything different than me because your brain registers it and compartmentalizes and processes it exactly the same.
Sure.
Whether you're staring down the barrel of another gun, or a tree falls in front of you in a big windstorm or whatever, it literally is the same thing." So people kind of minimize their experiences a lot when they
Yeah.
talk to me, unfortunately, but it matters just as much,
Sure.
just as much. And what it took for me to get into this place, um, really was psychedelics. That was the big. I've always been kind of really questioning things, or my understanding of what everyone has kind of told me about the world around me, and I've always really been kind of checked out from media and that type of thing, not necessarily trusting things, but what really made it sort of this undeniable presence was was going through psychedelics for the first time, and then seeing, whoa, man, literally everything I've been taught about all this stuff is
Yeah.
all not so. It isn't
Yeah.
that way. There is this whole other way. And so I was, I do say that, and I really do mean that. And for the most part, in the SEAL platoons, you have Type A guys that are just, they dominate everything, and they're used to
Go.
winning
Yeah.
everything. And I never felt that way. I had like, I didn't even have imposter syndrome because I never for a moment tricked myself into believing that I was an imposter. I was just like, I don't know how the hell I got here. I'm
Right.
just lucky to be here. I got backstage passes. I'm standing right next to superheroes. Like, this is the one thing of value that was undeniable to me that I was bringing to the table is I was a medic, and before I got in the military, I was a civilian paramedic. So I've been treating gunshot wounds and burns and crash
Yeah.
injuries and stuff like that. So I felt like I belonged in that sense. But just being surrounded by these guys that really were superheroes, I was like, man, this is unbelievable. But so really, my mind has always been kind of different than, like, one of these guys is not like the other.
Sure.
And I think that helped me when I did do psychedelics, being like, oh, this is what's been really kind of hanging over me for all these years that I never really understood. And now I wouldn't say that I fully understand it in the moment, but I can tell you that I understand a lot more about it than I ever have.
Yeah. What it sounds like is that you had this clarity around identity, that when I
Mhm.
talk to a lot of military guys, they are a soldier, or they are a SEAL, or they are a fighter, or they are a sergeant, or and that's how they identify, and that is everything. And then when they get out of active duty, or they retire, or they get like a medical discharge or something, their whole world is turned upside down, because everything that they identified with and the way they identified themselves, like if they walked into a party, which most people say, oh, what do you do? I'm a whatever, lawyer, military guy, SEAL, or whatever. It almost sounds like, and I felt that inside of me too, like I'm not this profession, I'm just in this
Mhm.
profession. I'm not this profession. I'm not a real estate agent. I'm not a coach. I'm not a podcast host. I am just doing those things. And what that left for me was, well, then who the fuck are you? Like, that's what I kept asking myself is, who are you, dude? If you're not a realtor, if you're not a coach, if you're not a podcast host, if you're not a shipping guy, then what's left is the scary piece, which most people distract themselves and avoid, which is, now you got to figure out who you are. Right. And that sounds very
Yeah.
similar to your story, which is you didn't identify as that guy. you just knew you were in that situation. That's cool. That's really cool. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you were saying before about how their world was turned upside. I think the world had remained the same. It's just the mind was turned upside down.
Totally.
Okay, I had this
Totally.
anchoring point, and then all of a sudden, but everything else around them was the same. And
Yeah.
in fact, even some of the way that the people that they love or love them, they'd never really changed how they felt about this person. But this person's like, oh, I'm not worth as much as I used to be. But so the other thing is, so I work with an organization called the Honor Foundation, and it's a nonprofit organization that helps special operations people transition from the military to the civilian world. And by far and away, the biggest number one concern of people leaving the military is, what do I do now that I'm no longer
Yeah.
this? And so we spend time talking to them, like, okay, just look at this like orb of light and just take one little fraction of that light. That's you being a SEAL. Congratulations. That's amazing. Okay,
Right.
whatever. You are the
Right.
rest of this also. Like you're
Yeah.
everything else. And when we hit it with some people and do a good job so that they can see for themselves that they really are so much more than they've ever understood, then that can become really powerful for them. And all of a sudden, this whole fear of, what do I do now is not
Yeah.
even a fear. Now it's like, whoa, what do I get to do now? You
Yeah.
know,
It's like a
is a big deal.
scarcity versus it's like scarcity versus unlimited possibility, and that's not an option and opportunity thing. That's a mindset thing. The first thing that like
Totally.
people say to me, I work with a lot of military guys, and they'll say to me, I just need more opportunity. And I go, no, you got to shift your mindset to understand that opportunity is standing in front of you.
It's
It's there.
everywhere.
You just can't see it because of the lenses that you're looking at life through. It's really it,
Yeah.
you know? And what's interesting is somebody asked me, I don't know, like a month ago, I was getting interviewed on a podcast and they said, what makes your programs different? And I said, we are more about elimination than acquisition. And they're like, well, what the hell does that mean? And I said, most seminars, programs, coaching, whatever that you go through, they pile shit on top of you. And yet they're not removing the pieces below
Mm.
that are the foundation of who you've become, what you do, how you think, the programming that you have from the past. If you don't remove that stuff, you're building you're building a building on an old crappy foundation that can't support it. And that's why there's no sustainability in a lot of different programs that people take. And they come to us and they go, well, this shit's really hard. And I'm like, yeah, it's your life
Yeah.
though. Like, how hard
Yeah.
are you willing to work? Like, I guarantee you, there's an Elon Musk like meme that says people will freak the fuck out when their phone is on 1% and do whatever it takes to find a charger. Yet when their dreams are dying, they won't do shit about it except for complain.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, think
Yeah.
about that. It's just a phone. It's just a phone. Yet
Yeah.
there's a whole different mindset when it comes to our own dreams. And maybe that's a self-worth, self-value thing. Probably
Well, they're
is.
not addicted to themselves like they are to their
Right.
phone.
That's a good point.
that's that's one
That's a
thing.
great point. Yeah.
However, I,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying too, which is also a huge point and very valuable thing to understand. Yeah, you can watch their dreams burning up in flames and like, oh well, that's just kind of how that goes,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to. But you're right. It is weird because on the surface, I think if you listen to some of the things that you and I are talking about, sounds easy. Well, what do you mean don't do anything? Anybody can do that. What?
Right.
Wait, just try it. Try not doing nothing,
Yeah. It's not
but just
nothing.
being. Yeah,
Yeah.
just being and allowing yourself to tap into flow and all of this stuff
Sure.
and connecting to your deepest self. That's not easy at all.
No.
And so I think to people on the surface, it seems like it's like checking the easy box. Nothing could. I can tell you, you know, typical military stuff, especially over the last 20 years. I've been shot at, got my face blown up. I've almost killed my friends in a rollover Humvee accident while I was driving. Like all this, just normal stuff that kind of goes along with the territory. And never have I ever been even close to the level of fear that I had when I was what you were talking about earlier, looking at myself essentially naked with who I actually am, not who I was trying to be, not who I was supposed to be, or whatever, but just completely bare to the bones who I really that that was scary because then I'm
Sure.
like, oh, this is why I don't belong in this room with these superhero. Oh, this and being honest, which is a very difficult thing, and even the pursuit, I would say, because I genuinely try to be honest with myself always, and then I started to really figure out, like, no, I was just kind of really doing my best to take care of myself
Sure.
by lying to myself, and I didn't
Yeah.
even know it. It is a hard thing, but very worth it once you break through all of that mire, you know?
Agreed. What's interesting, what you're talking about is this constant pursuit of external stimulation. Although what we talked about earlier was how external stimulation is actually your enemy. And it's not exactly external stimulation. Like Aaron and I have a an exercise called angles of avoidance. And again, it's first it's illumination, right? Understanding, and then it's elimination, getting rid of the things that no longer serve the result that you want in the formula of your life. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. You don't feel like it does. You don't doubt it sometimes. It's exact. 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. And so the different formulas and different levels of your life are not equaling what you want. So people, like what you were saying, kind of like, the hardest thing I've got to face is me, and most
Mhm.
people would say like being shot at, getting blown up, rolling a Humvee and almost killing your friends. That would be the scariest thing. Yet that doesn't compare to to the fear about how we feel about ourselves inside. And so the angles of
Mhm.
avoidance is, Aaron and I have like 52 things on this list that show people this is how you avoid dealing with your shit. So you work all week, and then you work, and then you do stuff all weekend, and then it repeats, and then a month goes by, and 6 months, then a year, and then 10 years goes by, and you go, I wonder why my wife wants a divorce.
Yeah.
I wonder why my kids don't talk to me, and
Yeah.
and it's because you didn't slow down and stop doing to start being. And this is definitely not the conversation I thought you and I would have. And it's awesome that we're having it. And so like, and it's scary. No one's going to say it's not. You and I will never tell you it's not scary. Some of the scariest times of my life have been sitting here when my wife's like, don't get on your computer. Just sit and listen to a meditation. And I'm like,
Mm.
well, I feel like I need to be productive. I own a business. I own multiple businesses. And she's like, being productive and being busy are two different things. You're about to be busy, not productive. Don't confuse that shit. Don't mistake movement for achievement. Just because you're moving around doesn't mean you're doing anything. The best thing you can do for you right now is for you to focus on you, not your businesses, because your businesses benefit from you focusing on you.
Yeah.
Way easier said than done. However, it's one step, one step, one step. It's not like you don't just learn this in a day. This is a lifetime practice, right? Like you're still working on yourself, you're still working on stuff, and I'm sure from your military experience, you saw some stuff and experienced some stuff that added to the plate of stuff you got to eliminate from your mind that kind of held you down or was like harder to work those knots out from inside. You know what I mean? I want to talk about
Yeah.
psychedelics. I want to talk about psychedelics though, because I know someone's going to go, "Hey, why don't you go back to that? Let's go back to those for
Okay.
a second." Um, what psychedelics are we talking about? Psilocybin, ayahuasca, LSD? What are we talking about?
The three main psychedelics that I work with and that I sit with people, because I'm also a psychedelic reintegration coach, are 5-MeO, ibogaine, and psilocybin. Those are the
Hmm.
three main ones that I work with. And I guess we're going to be starting with ayahuasca here pretty soon. I've been invited out to experience ayahuasca for the first time later this year,
Okay.
so I'm really looking forward to seeing how that is. But it, I would say that if I had an area of expertise within the world of psychedelics, it's those three
Got it.
medicines: ibogaine,
Well,
5-MeO, and psilocybin.
what is so? I've heard of ibogaine. I've had plenty of experience with psychedelics in ceremonial format. I have experience with
Mhm.
ayahuasca. What's 5-MeO?
So the full name is 5-MeO DMT.
Oh,
I failed to mention DMT because whenever people hear DMT, they're like, "Oh, DMT," and it's not. They're completely um, different results and different effects, and even different molecules.
sure.
So 5-MeO is that comes from the desert toad, the Sonoran desert toad. It's the
Oh,
poison
right.
that's extracted out and it's crystallized. And to our best understanding, it is the most powerful psychedelic in the world.
Hmm.
But the unexpected thing is that the the journey of it lasts for about 15 or 20 minutes. You know,
Oh, wow.
it's not like this 16-hour or
Yeah,
20 hours.
crazy.
Some of these have like 2 or 3
Yeah,
days. But what makes it the most powerful psychedelic is that if you're really fully able to release to the medicine, you can absolutely experience an egoless state. Kind of, it's the closest that I know of connecting where you are in this living state to whatever it is we actually are beyond this.
yeah,
Um, that's what makes it so powerful. And the other piece that makes it really powerful is how I got connected with this medicine, and also all the time when I'm sitting with people who are receiving this medicine, it's always because of post traumatic stress,
sure.
traumatic brain injury, and that kind of thing. And when you are gone to the medicine, your body in this world is going through. If you were to sit there and watch somebody go through 5-MeO, I mean, it's pretty scary.
Sure,
It's like might as well be watching The Exorcist kind of thing. Some people don't do anything,
sure.
uh, but some people. I mean, there's everything. He goes from full on screaming and throwing up, all these things. But the interesting thing is when you come out of, like, you don't even know that you did any of that. Like, man, my throat feels like kind of sore somehow. I wonder why that is. Like, man, you were
Yeah,
just. But at the end of the day, what it took me through of watching people go through, I mean, it really was. It's uncomfortable to watch in the beginning, but now what I see it is just like everything in life. I see them going through the deepest, darkest, and
sure,
coming out the
sure.
other side being like, literally everything is going to be okay now.
Yeah.
Where these people were struggling with suicide like on a day-to-day basis.
Hmm.
And so it's really, I mean, psychedelics aren't right. I don't believe in any way aren't right for everybody. They're not meant for everybody. But if you're able to do that and receive it in a positive way, man, it can make huge shifts
Sure.
in a matter of minutes.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you what one of the first time I did ayahuasca, it was 20 beginning of 2018. I was kind of like we talked about earlier. I was running this life and this business that I thought I was supposed to. I was doing what
Yeah.
I thought I was supposed to do, providing at a high level for my family, money, basically, and opportunity. And turns out that's not correct. Not in my life, at least. It wasn't correct. Um, and I realized that I needed more help. And the universe delivered a plant medicine experience like real in my face. One night, I got home from a seminar down in Florida, and this this like lady that I'd met one time, Rhonda. She was this beautiful soul in my life. She like now she is. She wasn't back then. I just met her once in Montreal randomly at this house, and she called me and she said, "What'd you go through this weekend?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Like I didn't post it on social, nothing. Nobody knew I was there. And I was like, all right, that's interesting. And we kind of got off our text, and then my YouTube feed was all ayahuasca, all ayahuasca. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? The only time I'd ever heard of ayahuasca was from Robin Quivers on the Howard Stern show. That's it. Nobody else. So my wife's like, I think you got a sign. Because I kept asking my wife, like, I need more help. I need more. My question is, I was so scared of myself inside that I was shaking, crying, like
Mhm.
about to drink the medicine. And The shaman says, you don't have to do this. You did travel across the country to come here, and it called you. The medicine called you. The spirit called you. So you can choose to drink or not drink. Just understand that where you are in your life right now, the only way out is through. And the
Yeah.
scary shit is what you got to go through. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay. And I drank the cup and I started walking back to my seat. I was the last one. It was like 16 people in this room. And I'm seeing all these people laid out on these black mats covered in a white blanket. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a fucking cult. I just drank
Yeah.
poison. I'm going to die. And that's how I started my ayahuasca journey. Really good way to start, by the way.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I felt the medicine coming on and I'm like, I'm, I
You're
have a
in it
kid.
now.
I can't believe I did this. I got a wife and a kid. Oh my. And then I woke up in the morning because I asked the medicine to treat me with kindness, like real gentle on me. And it did. And it was very gentle the first night. Second night, I doubled
Mhm.
the dose. It wasn't as gentle. So my question is, like, with all the stuff that you've seen and it has affected your life and perhaps what people would perceive as a negative, like, weren't you scared to dive that deep inside and let that medicine show you the scariest parts of your internal? Or have you just seen so much crazy external that the internal wasn't going to be that scary, like, in your mind?
I was totally naive.
Interesting.
Totally. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff, to be honest with you. I was, we had our weekly meetings, and one of the guys that's with us say, Diego, I'm not gonna be at the meeting next week. I'm going down to Mexico. They're treating team guys who have traumatic brain injury, PTS, chemical addiction, and the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, awesome, brother, man. Go down. Let me know how it goes. I can't wait to see you again. All right.
Yeah.
So he came back. I'm like, how'd it go? He's like, you got to meet these people. I got to introduce you. So I introduced them. He introduced us, and I'm just floored with the testimonials that they're talking to me about. And these are people that I know. We have a small, real, fairly small community, and and I'm and I know that these guys are struggling hard
Sure.
because of things that they experience, and somehow with all the time that I've never been in Afghanistan, but all the time I have in Iraq, and just by the normal things that kind of come in life, just being a SEAL, somehow I don't have uh, PTS. I
Yeah.
don't have any significant traumatic brain injury, um, and I don't have chemical addiction. So when
Wow.
they asked me to go, I was like, yeah, I would love, so I can learn, because what I really want to do is really take care of these guys that are suffering from these things.
Yeah.
And by the way, wouldn't it be awesome if I didn't have all this baggage that I had to dump, so I can just be there for them and help them, and just not have to worry about you know what projecting or anything like that. And they're like, well, we have a thing going on this weekend if you want to come down. And I was like, oh, this weekend? Like, are you being serious right now? I was all looking at my watch, looking at my calendar, like, I don't know. But I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll come down. And they leave on Fridays and come back on Mondays. They invited me down on Sunday. So the guys who had been there already had done Ibogaine, which is a 16-hour-ish long medicine,
Yeah.
generally speaking. And they were showing up to do the 5-MeO. And so I sat there and I watched this guy that I knew well. I mean, if there was anybody who has seen, done, experienced some of the worst things known to humans, is this guy.
Yeah.
And, I heard him go through his 5-MeO experience, and it scared me. I was like, man, that's whatever that was. I don't want to do that. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden I get this knock on my door, and they're like, hey, you're up. And I was like, what?
Oh, you heard it. You didn't see it.
No, we were in this beautiful villa in Mexico overlooking the Pacific Ocean, this huge compound. He was over by the ocean, and I was out by the street with a couple of structures in between us. And I still heard him through. And the houses in Mexico, they're not like a drywall. They're straight concrete,
Right.
cinder blocks and all that. I heard everything. And so it knocked on the door and like, all right, you're up. I'm like, man, okay, here we go. And as I was walking towards the place where they do five, because you do 5-MeO one at a time. There's so much
Right.
stuff going on you can't do like, or you shouldn't do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff you have to take care of. But anyway, he's walking out towards me, and he's got his arm around the therapist, and he looks at me and he says, "I'm gonna have a better life."
Nice.
And I was like, "What?" Because all I heard was
Right.
screaming, death, cuss words, the whole thing. And I'm like, "Oh man." So I was just completely nervous, and a lot of people liken it to, the first time you jump out of an airplane. You
Right.
got
Right.
your parachute, you got all this stuff, but you still got to jump out. There's like
Right.
that little precipice that you got to kind of go over. And that's exactly what it felt like to me, like the first time I was getting ready to jump out of an airplane. I didn't know what to expect, but I just knew my life was somehow going to be different here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And so they gave me the medicine, and it was, I was like, oh, it still really bothers me how I grew up. My
Oh,
relationship with my dad is
nice.
not what I think it is. My relationship with my brother is not what I am blind about. Like, there's some stuff that I had spent my whole life of like, listen, I can't let myself be bothered with this, or I can't, positive mindset, just it's all good. Just 100% lying to myself, not accepting the fact or the truth that it wasn't all good, that I still had a lot of healing to do and I didn't know it.
Sure.
And then so I guess in a way, 5-MeO was gentle and kind to me the first time. But one of the real values that I got out of that was, yeah, for sure, I didn't have any suicidal ideations or, like I said, chemical addiction or anything like that. But what I got out of the medicine was like, whoa, there's so much more to learn and discover here. Like
Yeah.
I'm doing this again. And so I've done 5-MeO 6 times. I've done ibogaine twice. I've done heroic dosages of psilocybin 6 times as well. At each one of those, it got deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'm well into like, hey, bring the heat. There's no
Yeah.
gentleness about anything. Just if the hammer's got to drop, come on, let's go, let's do
Yeah.
this. And so, yeah, it went from that kind of gentle reminder of like, hey, you're not where you
No,
think you
finish.
are, to, epigenetic kind of stuff, baggage stuff of lifetimes that I don't even have anything to do with are
Yeah.
within me.
Yeah.
And if I could just tell this story real quick, because
Please.
the people are like, "What are you talking about?" Um, so epigenetics is really just the whole idea that our lives aren't encapsulated within just our one lifetime. So really great story is a buddy of mine that I went to SEAL training with. He actually graduated as the honor man. He was one of the very first SEAL dog handlers in our community. We used to outsource that stuff. Didn't work out too well. So there's like, hey, we need to make SEALs dog handlers, so we're good on target. Well, anyway, he had done that for a couple of years, and he ended up getting out. And he started. His name is Josh Morton, and he works with Canine Tactical. They turn out some of the best tactically trained dogs in the world. But what he says is it takes about 4 years from the time a dog's born till it's ready to go out the door and start working with
Hmm.
SAS, wherever, because it takes them 4 years for these dogs to learn these behaviors. About 6 years ago, he had an opportunity to clone a dog. And he took that opportunity. And the amazing thing that he found is that it took him 4 months to train that dog in some of the behaviors that it
Oh,
took
wow.
other dogs 4 years to learn. So that's what. So why is that? What is that? Another story is they did a study with mice, cherry blossoms, and electric shock. So every time they showed the mice cherry blossoms, they gave them electric shock. Over time, they decreased the electric shock, but continued to show them the cherry blossoms until finally they weren't shocking them at all. But as soon as they showed them a cherry blossom, the mouse would actually have a physical reaction as though it was being shocked.
Yeah.
I think most people can understand that. But what freaked me out about that whole thing is that the grandchildren of those mice who had
Yeah.
nothing to do with the study were having physical reactions by seeing a cherry blossom. So what is that? Well, that's what epigenetics is all about. And so the best that science can tell is that there's 7 generations of influence on who we are. So 7 generations ago are within your DNA that comprise, you, all the successes, the failures, and all that. There are other people who believe, and I'm more aligned with this potential, that everyone who has ever lived, that has ever been part of your family tree, has room in your DNA that's taking something up. And so that's what I mean. So yeah, you can go through all your childhood stuff. You can go through all this, mistakes that you made, or whatever it is. But that's just the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
goes and
Yes.
goes
Deep.
and goes as deep as you want. And if you really, so if you're thinking about like what good can you do for the world, imagine what good could you do for for you and everyone who has ever been to help to create you, because there is still some unsettled business or unfinished business that needs to be taken care of within all of us. It's the reason why a 3-year-old can walk up to a piano bench and be like, oh, what's this thing do, and all of a sudden just start smashing away, creating
Yeah.
Mozart. It's not because, well, I don't think it, first of all, I haven't said this, but let me just say, I don't know anything, okay? Every, at all. Everything I know, somebody's either told me or I've experienced it in my own way, but all of that stuff is clouded with bias, prejudice,
Of course.
um, whatever it is. So don't take anything that I'm saying as like, oh, this is the way everything is. But that's how I feel. I feel in my experience that now looking at these kids or these people that are just truly talented at something, like it is most likely that that came from somewhere else, and they're just the pinnacle of this experience in that moment.
Dude, I 100% love that you brought this up. I love that you brought this up because I've been reading this book called "It Didn't Start with You,"
Oh,
and it's you know what I'm talking about?
mm-mm.
Mark, I forget the name. I'll put it in the show notes for the audience. Just understand, if you haven't really gone through the surface level personal development and gotten in a little deep, this book's gonna blow your freaking mind. Like, it's gonna blow your whole world up. And dude, I am using microdose psilocybin, even as of last night, um, to work through and put the puzzle pieces together about some of the fears that I have that are irrational, and not, I don't understand how I got them at all from this
Yeah.
book. And so it's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of people would be like, what are you talking about? Well, guess what? It's cellular. What you're talking about is the blood of
Mhm.
your 7 generations ago is in and passes through the placenta and gets into you. The cells are alive. Like, they understand energy. If you ever watch the video on YouTube with the water molecules that they talked positive thoughts to, and they froze and beautiful, and then they talk negative and hateful stuff, and they froze like crazy. That's what
Yeah.
your cells do. So, dude, I'm so with you. It is not a coincidence that you brought that up. I had the hardest morning this morning, because the psilocybin experience that I had last night showed me some things that I never connected before. And it was mind blowing. And I was so emotional this morning, like 5 a.m. in a meditation, so emotional. And I just started journaling and like connecting things like a crime scene. And I was like, oh my God. I never ever thought of how this affected my mom when I was born.
Mm,
And it was
mm.
already in her and it was in me. And now, like, I was able to see for the first time me as a baby. Like,
Mm.
from the
Yeah.
womb, I came
Mhm.
out 6 weeks premature and was immediately put into a box, right? An
Yeah.
incubator for weeks. And you always blame your parents for your bullshit. I never dug in deep enough to really understand or even ask what my parents went through
Mm.
that day, right?
Thinking their
A
little boy
mother
was,
a
yeah.
mother who can't touch her little baby. And it makes me emotional just thinking about it. And I was pouring my freaking heart out this morning, thinking like, oh my God, like I haven't shown my mom compassion for what she went through that day and the subsequent weeks, not being able to touch. Like I was fortunate enough to be able to touch my kids right away, feel them, bond with them. She couldn't do that. So when I think that my mom had conditions on her love and I blamed her for that, and by the way, that's all made up by me, right? So, mom, if you're listening, don't get crazy with this. Just listen. But when I was born, there were conditions put on her love. I was put into a box, an incubator. The condition was you can't touch him, you can't smell him, you can't kiss him. Like, and I felt that this morning, and that psilocybin helped me get that deep. And so I'm a huge proponent of plant medicine and these types of journeys to get deeper. And it is scary and it is hard. However, my job is to help free people from restraint and constriction internally. That's my mission in life. 10 million people I will help free their internal self from restriction and constraint. And I think plant medicine can do a phenomenal job. Like, dude, I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's so great. I love it. So have you read that book?
No, but just when you're talking about the title, I was like, oh man, that sounds like something I should check out.
You need to check it out. It's great. It's scary. It's scary.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're already on that path though, which is great. So, man, I there's so many things that I want to talk to you about, and I never thought we'd talk about plant medicine or any of this shit. So, I know what the audience is going to write to me. They're going to be like, "How'd you have a Navy SEAL in and now talk about being a SEAL?" So, I want to talk. I don't want to talk about combat. I want to talk about failure, and I want to talk about your story. Why did you decide to become a SEAL? Like, you were a medic before that. What was your journey like, and how do you bounce back from what may be some of the hardest things that humans go through, like self-imposed, right? Self-imposed. And through all your failures, why the hell did you keep standing back up and going back and trying again? Like what was going through your mind? That's torturous, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's shame. The only reason why I was a SEAL was because of shame.
what do you mean?
Um, when I was in high school, uh, I I was really good friends with my high school nurse. She was like the one that helped me strategize, the conversations I was going to have with my dad about what my report card looked like. She was kind of like,
Right.
okay, man, let's try to figure this one out. And I was a junior, and I showed her my report card. It was a 1.63, and she's like, Diego, what do you want to do in life? And I said, I think I want to be a doctor. And she's like, she's like, bro, doctors got to go to school for like 10 years, and it's really, really hard. It's a lot harder than your third time trying to pass algebra one. And she's like, do you know what a paramedic is? And I'm like, no, what's that? She's like, well, they're kind of like doctors, but instead of going to school for 10 years, they go to school for 10 months. And they save people's lives out on the street, or they help people out on the street. They bring them to the hospitals and leave them with the doctors, and doctors take them from there. I'm like, that sounds like the coolest thing I could ever imagine. That's absolutely what I want to do. And so I got on that train, man. It was just being a paramedic was like my whole life. I even came up with this whole plan. One of my favorite movies growing up, believe it or not, was Pretty Woman. And the reason why was because this dude was so jam packed, loaded with money, it was insane. I was like,
Right.
well, how do I get that much money? And I was like, well, I could own my own ambulance company. So that was what I was going to do. I was going to start my own ambulance. I had a business plan and everything without realizing it was a business plan. And then the summertime came, and my best friend Gordon, who lived across the street, we used to every once in a while throughout the summer we would just go to Blockbuster and go rent movies. And we rented Navy SEALs one time, and I'm watching this movie and I'm like, what is this? These guys are jumping out of planes, they're diving, they're driving fast, they're going after bad guys, shooting guns. Like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then about halfway through the movie, I realized that they had a medic on their team, and that was it.
Hmm.
That was this is me. This is what I'm going to do.
How old were you?
So I was, well, I guess 17 or
Okay.
so. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, and so I still had so I went and I like did the pre-joining of the military thing, and And what they told me was I had to take, so this story can be very long if I go through the thing, but we'll just say that literally every step of the way, the application process, the screening, the qualification process, like I failed all of it.
Hmm.
I didn't have the aptitude of the scholastic scores that I needed. I wasn't running fast enough. I had all kinds of stuff going on. And so I had to, so instead of like joining the military, going to boot camp, and back then going to like a specialty school and then going on to SEAL training, it took me like 2 years to get to that place of just retrying and reapplying and passing and all this stuff. So I finally made it to SEAL training, and I'm like, I'm here, like I made it, I'm in the arena. And we had our very first conditioning run on the first day, and I realized that I was in no condition to be in, but like I had no business being there. I
Yeah.
was remarkably slower than everybody else around me, and it was by a lot. And so what they have is in BUDS, or basic underwater demolition SEAL training. It's like the SEALs boot camp. They have these things where you go on these runs, and if you fall back, you get put in this thing called a goon squad,
Yeah.
where at the end of the run, everybody's like stretching out, drinking water, and getting ready for the next evolution. But the people who did fall back, it's they turn up, like they crank down, like you're doing fireman carries, you're doing lunges in the soft sand, you're doing like all these bear crawlers and all the they it's just another 30-40 minutes of everything sucks in your life, but it's built there to either get you stronger so you're not
Sure.
in the goon squad anymore, or to let you know that maybe you really don't belong
Not for
here.
you.
I was in every single goon squad in my class, but the interesting thing was, day after day after day went by, and guys were quitting, and I was staying there. So in the beginning, there were guys in my class that was kind of resented me even being there. Like, what are you doing? This is a grown man's camp. What are you
Yeah.
doing here, kind of thing. But after, all the helmets get like every time you quit, you put your helmet under the bell. So they're, you know, halfway through first phase, there, could be 100 or more helmets there.
Oh
The
wow.
more helmets that piled up, I was still there. And then so finally, guys in my class were like, well, I don't know that you should have came, but you're here. So let's do this thing. And then even more than that, I ended up even winning favor with some of the SEAL instructors, which is not, it doesn't happen. Like they
Yeah.
hate everybody. But some of these guys were pulling me aside. They were going like, dude, keep going. But the problem was I had this little kind of tickle in my legs, starting to grow into more than a tickle and all this stuff, and stress fractures, all of that stuff. And I had failed every single time run that we had. And then we got done with this really intense evolution, like this infinite evolution that you do in SEAL training. And all these guys quit because there was this terrible storm that day. There's wind, trees being uprooted, and the whole deal, freezing cold, everything was just nuts. And we had made it through, and we were starting Hell Week like that following Sunday. And I got a tap on my shoulder as we're celebrating after completing this incredible day of training. They're like, hey, man, they have this thing it's called a Hell Week board. If you fail anything, you got to go and they're going to decide whether or not you're going to stay. I had no idea there was such thing. I was 19 years old, but really kind of going on 5 kind
Sure.
of thing. I was very immature, and I was just like, hey, I'm here, so I deserve to be here, kind of thing. I didn't know any better. But the next day came, and while all the other guys were getting ready and prepared for Hell Week, I had to stand in front of the first phase instructor cadre, and they said, "Yeah, you're not welcome here anymore." And I was just it. Uh, all the stuff that I had failed and all of that stuff, all the goon squads, everything, the logs, the boats, the cold, everything, all for nothing in my mind at the time.
Sure. At the time, yeah.
Yeah, and so there was no there was no question. I mean, it wasn't like this thing that well, please let me stay. It's not. You're gone.
You're gone, yeah.
And so I ended up, it was the military. So I ended up ended up becoming a medic with the Marines, which was amazing. I healed up. I went on deployment with the Marines, And I was there. I was with them for about 2 years, and then my contract came up, and I could stay or leave the military. And I'm like, well, I joined to be a SEAL and not a SEAL, so I'm leaving. So I got out of the military totally. And then from there, I did different things. I was a bartender. I was, like I said, a lead singer in a
Oh
band.
wow.
Um, I ended up getting my civilian paramedic ticket, and I worked in Massachusetts, Florida, and Hawaii. And about 8 years had passed. But during those 8 years, about 3 times a month, at minimum 3 times a month, I would have just like this terrible dream about not making it through. And finally, one day I woke up from this dream, was sick and fucking tired of having this dream. The only way it's going to go away is if I
Is
go
if you go
back.
back.
And so I was like 270 pounds. And so I had a long way to go. So I ended up losing all that weight, and I rejoined the military, went straight into SEAL training, and I made it through. Luckily, I separated my shoulder halfway through training, but I was able to stay with my class and finally, eventually graduated. But to go way back to the beginning is like, what is all this shame? Like, literally, the reason I went back to SEAL training is because I was ashamed that I didn't make it through. Living the life that I was living as a paramedic and serving in that capacity, I wanted for nothing. I was doing everything that I loved doing, taking care of people, you know, just the life of a paramedic to me was, I didn't need anything else. I made enough money. I could go anywhere. I mean, like I said, I'm Florida, Massachusetts. Why I could go anywhere I want to,
Sure.
especially I work for American Medical Response, and they're a nationwide company. All I had to do was get the certification for whatever state I want to work. I could do anything, but I was just so ashamed of having to tell the story over and over again. Like, oh yeah, I was in SEAL training once. Oh, that's so cool. Like, no, I fucked up. I failed. You know. So, and the thing is, like, well, you didn't quit. It doesn't matter. You either make it or you don't.
Right.
And I didn't
Right.
make it. So, um, yeah. And
What
then
what was
go
it
ahead.
though? Like, was the I think this really connects to this is a human thing. I mean, SEALs is tough. Like, this applies to the person that gets their hands sweaty when they're about to make cold calls every day in and day out, or
Hmm.
or whatever it might be that scares them. I mean, I've actually never heard anybody say it was shame that kept driving me, and I mean, through something like Buds. And by the way, audience, if you don't know what Buds is, go to YouTube and look up a real video on Buds. Not like look up. There's a documentary on Buds, and it does not hide anything, and it's really good, and it's kind of scary too. But like, I think most people, it's like taking a year off between high school and college. Like that 8 year period. I mean, you could have said, well, I'm 270 pounds. I mean, come on, man, it's a lot of work. And I failed and I didn't even fail last time. They just kicked me out. And I don't want to go through that shit again. What was it in your brain that said, no, turn back? You got to do this. Like that's a lot of motivation. That's a lot of self-drive to not only, it wasn't like you were in like godlike state, in like chiseled and ripped and ready to roll, and you got right in. Like, you had to do a lot of work and then go in every single day. How the hell did you keep pushing yourself, even just to drop the weight to get in? And how did you push past the fear of being rejected? Because obviously it's an inherent human fear that we don't want to be kicked out of the tribe. We don't want to be rejected. So not only is it physically and mentally and emotionally taxing to like the nth degree, you could be rejected again, and you have no say in it. How the hell did you push yourself through that?
The short answer is flow. Um, what I didn't realize at the time was like tapping into this universal flow where you're actually being kind of pulled by the universe, instead of you foraging through the jungle with your machete. Um, you can do the same thing, but one is a lot easier than the other. And so the difference between flow is you're swimming with the current, and not flow is you're swimming against the current to handle like your own agenda. Like, this is what I want. It just so happened that the agenda that I had was in line with what the universe's plans were for me, I guess
Totally.
I could say. So yeah, I worked out every day, but it wasn't difficult. I was pulled to work out every day. I
Yeah.
finally saw a way out of this muck
Hmm.
of blackness, darkness that was going to be with me for the rest of my life. I
Yeah.
remember asking myself a question when I was kind of going through the decision making process. If I woke up tomorrow as a SEAL, would it have been worth it? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm like,
Sure.
okay, well then there's your answer. And that turned out to be a really cool question because I ask myself that question all the time whenever some sort of big project comes up or there's a lot of time investment or energy
Sure.
or whatever. If I wake up tomorrow and this is the thing, and it would it be worth it? And sometimes like, no, it's not. All right, cool. Then I don't have to mess with that, you know. But with the question about being a SEAL, there was no hesitancy. Even I worked crazy hours when I was like, I would work 4 hours on, 4 hours off, 4 hours on, 4 hours off for like 4.5 days straight.
Hmm.
Um, so one 4 hour break would be sleeping. The other
Yeah.
4 hour break would be working out. Um, it was just nuts. And as a paramedic, like that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but that's what I was doing. It's
Yeah.
just kind of the way it was. But so the, it's funny because I think about what really strong and really motivated guys have to go through SEAL training, and they barely make it through.
Sure.
And I think about like, how the hell did I make it through when I had all this extra bullshit that I was
Yeah.
dealing with? Of I already know what it's like to run to your legs break, and it's not good enough no matter what you do,
Sure.
and to be rejected. Like I already know what that's like. Um, so I was always in awe of the guys that nobody was having a good time by any means in a lot of these things, but there were guys who were finishing these runs that had all kinds of energy left for whatever was coming up the
Yeah.
rest of the day, and I was like dying.
Yeah.
I was like, all I wanted. I remember specifically running on the sand and just imagining trying to manifest a comet coming out of the sky and just landing on me and killing me, so the pain would be fucking gone
Yeah.
because it just hurt. And we're like 15 minutes into the run, and we still got
Yeah.
a couple more hours of this stuff to go. I want this to be over. And the only way I know that could be over is if a comet comes out of the sky and hits me and just destroys me, But the
What?
comets never came. And anyway, yeah, it was just funny. But
What?
go ahead.
When you say flow state, I wanna get real clear on that. Do you mean present moment? You mean being present? I mean, flow is flow, yet is it also the present? So, like, your mind's not processing the bullshit of the future and the fears or the stuff from the past. Like, are you in flow in the present moment, or are you just like, what does that mean to you?
They're not one and the same, which I don't know that that's what you're asking,
No, I'm
but
just
I
wondering,
don't know.
like I know what I'm processing is all right, flow state. But I've been in flow states before, and I don't want to like I'm not I can't I'm not I don't feel like I'm ready to tackle like buds training, like or
Mhm.
running on the beach, freezing cold, wet and sandy and chafing everywhere. And so I want to get deeper into that flow state and kind of as we wrap up here, like what does that mean to you, and how can somebody get into that and tap into that?
Releasing, how
Mhm.
releasing any inhibitions, any limitations, and just allowing whatever is before you, just go down that path with no expectation, no judgment, no anything. When it came, I mean, because it really did, it came over me like a wave uh, crashing on somebody who's just standing on the shore. You're going back to SEAL training. I'm like, oh, here we go.
Right.
It wasn't like, well, no, because I was 20 when I went through the first time, broke my legs. Now this time I'm going to be 29 years old. I mean, there's no way.
Oh
All
wow.
none of
Yeah.
that. I was just, I'm going. And I even started to get injured in Hawaii with those same familiar pains in my legs. And I'm like, man, I don't have a chance. Now my legs are starting to hurt in training. What's going to happen when I get to SEAL training? And I finally was just like, screw it.
Yeah.
I'm going back. If I get hurt when I go back, and that's fine, so be it. But at least I'm going back. And I never had any leg pain ever since that day. I
So
just
you released it.
letting it go,
Yeah.
just let it go. And and what I found is, yeah, I can be in flow in the present moment by just completely focusing on what I'm actually doing. But there are other times that I was in flow where I was completely checked out. Like
Hmm.
I was in flow many, many times in Hell Week, and I was checked out. I was just, how did I get here? How did I get there? Whatever.
Right.
I don't know. Just boom, just letting it. I I just let it take me. I guess I could say.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I didn't know anything about flow at the time. There was no way that I could sit there and like recreate
Sure.
it or craft it or produce it or anything. I was just in it.
Yeah.
But the more I'm in, more I was in a flow state, and then I learned about flow. I was like, oh man, I was in flow here. I was there, writing a book. I'm in flow right there too. Like then all of a sudden now it's like, oh okay, it almost gets reproducible. And for some people, for sure, there's no problem for them. They can produce.
Sure.
I want to be in flow. Here I go. I'm not
Yep.
there, but for sure, there's a small muscle that's being worked out over and over again. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm here now. And I now know where I feel like I know the conditions to set in order to tap into that. So when I've got something that's coming up that takes a lot of work, a lot of effort, and it's going to be, sort of a long period of time, and maybe I don't feel like it at the moment, I know what I can do for myself. Like, okay, so if I'm gonna have the universe pull me down this road, what do I have to do to allow that to happen at all?
You're like, what do
And
you
for
need to do?
sure,
Yeah.
release, let
Yeah.
it be.
I could, so we got to wrap because I know my editor is going to be like, stop going over an hour. I could talk to you for like 3 hours, man. I'm fascinated by, I'm fascinated by your story. Can we have you back on?
Yeah, I think a good thing. Our book is coming out
Yeah.
later on in the year, and maybe it'll be good to revisit after the
Let's do
book
that.
gets released. If you think,
Yeah. Let's do that because I don't really plan these out. I mean, I'm not irresponsible. Like I don't just open a mic. I look at your one sheets and I go, okay, yeah, I think this works. The universe sends me the people that are meant to be on this show. I don't. There's no outcome, and so there's so much more I want to ask you, just in curiosity of your life and story. And so, yeah, let's do that. Let's promote your book. Let's. When is that coming out?
we're going to self-publish sometime around September.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So we'll do. That's only like it's only a couple
it's
months
just
away,
coming.
really. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's coming.
Well, dude,
Yeah,
this has been awesome. I there are so many things that I didn't know we were going to talk about that came up,
yeah,
and just and you want to talk about flow? This was flow. This was
yeah.
great, man. This was
All of a
really
sudden,
great.
an hour and 5 minutes has gone by.
Yeah, yeah. I really just I want to thank you. I really appreciate your time. Very grateful for you
I
being here,
appreciate
being
you, man.
open, honest. The audience is gonna I mean, they're gonna get so much out of this. And it's so crazy that you knew epigenetics.
Mm.
I haven't had anybody on here yet that talks about epigenetics. So read that book so we can talk about it next time. I'm telling you,
Oh,
I'm
that's
on
gonna be
my
cool.
I've read I think I've read it. I think I'm on my third or fourth time reading it because
Whoa. Yeah,
it's
so
like
much.
it's like water percolating through hard rock. It
Yeah,
just it's slow as hell going through, and I'm like, it's going to percolate in. I know there's clearance. I know there's something I'm going to get from this. Freedom, elimination, clarity, able to help other guys and women through even more. It's great, man. So thanks for being here.
I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And audience, remember, join our Facebook community. Go check out Diego. Where can people find you?
At thetridentapproach.com, thetridentapproach.com. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. That's probably my biggest social media, but we're going to start a little TikTok thing here and there about mindfulness and elite performance and all that stuff. So that's going to be coming out soon as well.
Love it.
So yeah,
Love it.
we have
Well,
some stuff on Instagram and all that, but I don't really spend too much time on there.
It's all good,
Social
man.
media is toxic to me, bro.
I totally get it. Totally get it. All right, Diego. I gotta get ready for another interview. Dude, thanks for being here. And audience, thanks for listening. I hope you got a lot out of this. If you have questions, send them over to me. Get Diego at thetryandapproach.com. We'll catch you on the next one.